What is happening, everybody? It is Thursday afternoon, which means it is time for a DraftKings Reignmakers breakdown. If you guys could do me a favor as you're watching this, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. What we're going to be doing here is we're going to be breaking down all the upcoming slates that we have for NFL this week. So we've got the Thursday night slate, we've got the Saturday slate, we've got Sunday, we also got Sunday night football. Anything you guys have questions about, throw it into the YouTube chat. I always look at the YouTube chat and answer any questions you guys have over the course of the show. And the only thing I'm going to ask of you guys to like, follow, subscribe, and also, if you're looking to join Reignmakers, you haven't checked it out, I know it's late in the season, but they still do have free starters packs available. So with no cost to yourself, you could sign up at Reignmakers, get a totally free starters pack, get yourself a set of cards that is free to you, but you could also win cash prizes with it. So if you're interested in that, taking some free cards, winning real money with it, there's a link for that below. It'll direct you to DraftKings to go sign up. So if you guys don't have any opinions on where we want to start with this show, we could get right into looking at Thursday night football. But if there's other stuff that you guys want to ask me about, throw it into the chat and we could hit on that as we go. But let's start here by looking at Thursday. So what I have on screen here, these are our Reignmakers projections over at stochastic.com. If you guys have watched this video before, you're probably pretty familiar with this. It is our projections for each player over the course of the week. Also, we have in here imported the low core or rare, whatever rarity tier it is you're looking for, but defaults here to the core. So the lowest asking price for each individual players, and then a metric here of a cost per dollar metric. So if you're looking to buy players on the secondary market, you know which ones are the best values to get to. Let's go ahead and look at Thursday Night Football, where we have the Saints taking on the Rams. And one thing that we should note here is that as far as the superstar goes, Cooper Kupp is the only one. If you are looking to play a superstar, you got an option of Cooper Kupp and nobody else. So Cooper Kupp is the guy to play in the superstar spot if you are going to use a superstar, because he's the only one. There's no other options. If we look at the players who are projected the best, there's a pretty clear tier listing here, right? Where we have Kyren Williams in a tier of his own, projected for 20 fantasy points. Nobody's within a couple of fantasy points of him. Then you get Cooper Kupp at 18. Stafford is at 17.3. We've got Kamara at 16.48. And then we've got Puka Nacua at 15.91. Derek Carr, 15.34. And then once we get to Chris Olave, there's a really big drop-off. So I don't know that we want to consider anybody for Reignmakers outside of these core guys, right? So nothing below Chris Olave do I really want to be getting to. I would be looking at Olave, Derek Carr, Puka Nacua, Alvin Kamara, Matt Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Kyren Williams. Something else of note here as well. There aren't that many Puka Nacua cards available because he was not a very highly regarded rookie coming out of the draft. He wasn't a high draft pick, so there were no cards for him to open up the year. So as a result, we've got not that many Nacua cards in circulation. As a result, if you look at the low core floor prices of all the players in this game, Puka Nacua is actually the second most expensive at $479. The most expensive is Kyren Williams at $668. The reason isn't just because of projections. It's projections combined with scarcity. So if you have a Puka Nacua card, it is a reasonable way to differentiate your lineup, or potentially playing Puka Nacua in the captain spot, because it is something that is going to be not utilized all that much just because of a lack of circulation of Puka Nacua cards. So if you have a Nacua, I actually do like him quite a bit in the captain spot for today, just because of the scarcity aspect that comes into play. If you're just looking to build the optimal lineup based on projections, that's going to be Kyren Williams in the captain spot, Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, and Alvin Kamara in the flex spots. So something else of note there is that's the way to build the optimal lineup. That's also going to be duped a ton of times. So we usually try to find ways to be a little bit contrarian on this show as well. All right, what else do we want to look at here? If it isn't going to be Nacua to differentiate lineups in the captain spot, where else could we go? Right? Where else could we potentially look here? By the way, there aren't that many Alvin Kamaras in circulation either, because Kamara was suspended to start the year. So this is kind of a weird slate where if you do play Kamara and Nacua in the same lineup, it's going to make for a fairly unique combination. We don't really get that happening too often for Reignmakers, especially not for these showdown contests. It is going to be the case for tonight, though. And then if we look at some of the other players here between Cooper Kupp, Matt Stafford, Kyren Williams, if you do want to play somebody in the captain spot who isn't Kyren Williams, I mean, Cooper Kupp has as much upside as anybody in fantasy football. I know that there's been times he hasn't looked great this year. He's had some down games. He's been hurt, but he's looked much better as of late. And if we look at the target share of Cooper Kupp that he had last week, it was more on the uptick and in line with what we've come to expect from Cooper Kupp in previous seasons. So Cooper Kupp is sharing targets, a little bit more with Puka Nacua than a lot of us would have expected coming into the year. But look at Cooper Kupp now that he's healthy. Last week, 8 catches on 8 targets for 111 yards and a touchdown. The game before, 8 catches on 10 targets, 115 yards and a touchdown. So a lot of indications here that Cooper Kupp is finally 100% healthy again, whereas that wasn't really the case for a little bit of a stretch here. If you look at the end of October through November, there was actually 0 games where Cooper Kupp had north of 50 receiving yards, and his targets were down in a lot of those games as well. So that looks like it's a thing of the past, no longer an issue. So Cooper Kupp, who's also only a fourth of the price, or like a third of the price here of Kyren Williams, I think he's a pretty good buy on the secondary market. And then you could also make stacks of the Rams passing game with Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, maybe a Puka Nacua, and don't include Kyren Williams as a way to maybe differentiate yourself from a really expensive Kyren Williams there. If there are no other questions on Thursday Night Football, then I'll move on to looking at the Saturday slate, because we do have a 2-game Saturday slate. Then, of course, there's the main Sunday slate, and then we've got the Sunday Night Football game as well. So let's go ahead and look at Saturday. And if we go ahead and look at the options we have Saturday, we've got 2 games. Not the 3 games we had last week, so not quite the same abundance of options, but still we've got a couple of games to choose from. We've got the Bills taking on the Chargers. We've got Herbert remaining out for the Chargers, and no official word yet on Keenan Allen, but it seems like he's trending towards being out in this game. So Buffalo Bills, fairly big favorites. And then we've also got the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we've got 2 games on Saturday, 4 teams playing, and only 1 starting quarterback. Every other team is without their quarterback. Kenny Pickett, out. Joe Burrow, out. Justin Herbert, out. So just what ends up happening this time of year in NFL. But if we go ahead and see now, what does that mean for the Saturday slate? Well, let's start by looking at the superstars, where here's what we have to choose from. Josh Allen. That's it. Why is that it? Because like we mentioned before, Justin Herbert's out. We've also got Jamar Chase. He is going to be out on Saturday. So not all that many superstars to choose from. Only one makes it kind of easy to figure out who we would use the superstar spot on if we were. That is going to be Josh Allen. So with that in mind, we don't have to really consider what to do with the superstar. Let's look position by position, where it's just by a mile. You're choosing Josh Allen here. I mean, the quarterbacks are Josh Allen, Easton Stick, Mitch Trubisky, Jake Browning. So Josh Allen, this is the guy that we're going to be going with. And I don't think there even are Jake Browning cards. Let me double check that. Were there Jake Browning cards available on the market or not? He isn't getting pulled into our projection, so maybe he's just missing. But I'm pulling up the app on my phone to double check here. Are there Jake Browning cards? It would help if I spelled his name correctly. Yeah, there are none. So it makes the choices even easier. You're going with Josh Allen. There's no opportunity cost because of the superstar, and all the other quarterbacks either suck or are so bad that they don't even exist as Reignmakers cards. And actually, I don't even think Jake Browning is that bad, but it doesn't matter because we don't have cards of him to pick from here. Running backs for Saturday. What running backs could we potentially be looking to roster here? James Cook. How about the game that James Cook had last week? Like, we have not seen very much of the Bills committed to a run game really at all the last few years. But James Cook is starting to see a lot more workload, and that really showed itself last week. We got James Cook ended up rushing for how many attempts and how many yards for James Cook, who should pass 1,000 rushing yards this weekend. He's also averaging over 5 yards per carry for the season. Yep, 25 carries for 179 yards for James Cook. For reference, his second highest rushing attempt total of the year was 17. So this was a massive change in terms of how the Bills have constructed their game plan. And considering how successful it was against a really good Dallas Cowboys team and a really good Dallas Cowboys defense, I think we should expect them to stick with it, at least to some extent. And then you also think it's easier matchup against the Chargers. It's a really favorable game script. Let's look at James Cook from last year. What was the most amount of rushing attempts he had in any game last year? Last year was 14 was the most. So I think they're feeling a little bit more comfortable with James Cook. And that's a spot where, if we look at our projections, definitely the running back to go to for the Saturday slate. All the running backs that are projecting decently well here. And boy, what a downfall for Austin Eckler, who not all that long ago was week in, week out, one of the highest projected running backs every weekend. We only even project for 10.72 fantasy points this weekend. So if we're looking to play somebody who isn't James Cook, Jaylen Warren, Joe Mixon, those are the next guys who are projecting the best. And as is per usual in our projections, we do have Jaylen Warren projected quite a bit better than Najee Harris. Najee Harris at 9.36 fantasy points, whereas Jaylen Warren is here at 12.13. So if you're trying to figure out, hey, what do I do with these Steelers running backs? Couple of things. First off, it's hard to figure out. I've been on the wrong side of the Steelers running backs constantly throughout the season, but if I have to pick one, I do think Jaylen Warren is the more talented of the two running backs. And we've seen so many times this year that the Steelers have indicated that, hey, this is going to be the week that we give Jaylen Warren more of a workload. It's never actually come to fruition. But if not now, then when? So Jaylen Warren, he is my preferred option in the Steelers' backfield on Saturday. Let's look at the wideouts. Wide receivers for the Saturday slate. And yeah, no surprises if you guys are looking at the top of the board. Stephon Diggs, 16.37 fantasy points. He is nearly, over 2 fantasy points clear of any other wide receiver on the slate. He's followed by T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. Each of them are benefiting from the absence of Jamar Chase. If we're trying to choose between Higgins or Boyd, my guy's going to be T. Higgins. We saw Higgins have a bigger role last week. I know he struggled over the course of the year, but still, T. Higgins is definitely somebody here who I think is going to make sense as somebody who should be seeing more volume in the absence of Jamar Chase. And even in a down year for T. Higgins, this is still a very talented wide receiver. And he's probably not going to be in Cincinnati next year, considering his contract expires. And then he's been a little bit of a letdown this year. But I mean, look at the other options behind Stephon Diggs. T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, George Pickens with Trubisky throwing on the football, Deontay Johnson, same sort of situation. The pass catchers just suck on this slate. So Stephon Diggs just by default becomes a guy who we're going to really, really want to roster. And then T. Higgins, just based on talent, is going to be my second favorite option here, but it's slim pickings for sure. And then also, if we were trying to make a lineup with Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, that gets a little tricky because we don't get the same benefit of the stacking because there are no Jake Browning cards available. So Stephon Diggs, definitely the guy I want to go to, followed by T. Higgins. So I'm taking another option here. I'll go with George Pickens, also just because talented receiver with a lot of big play upside. And he doesn't have to rely on Mitch Trubisky to throw him a pass downfield. It could be a scenario where George Pickens would, catch a short pass and then maybe could break it for a long touchdown or something like that. But hard to feel great about a lot of the options on Saturday who are not on the Bills. Cook looks great. Diggs looks great. Josh Allen looks great. But we do have to play players who are not on Buffalo. Let's look at the main slate now. Once again, if you guys have any questions, you could throw those into the YouTube chat, and it could be about anything. We could talk about Thursday Night Football, bets. We could talk about the main slate, Reignmakers, or Classic contests. And if you guys want to sign up at Stokastic.com, we are running a Christmas deal right now. So holidays, right? Holidays underway. And if you sign up for any package at Stokastic right now, you do get 25% off if you use the promo code HOLIDAY. HOLIDAY, in case people are confused about how many L's are in the word holiday. Just sign up using that link below. And then when you check out, use the promo code HOLIDAY to get a discount on whatever it is you choose to sign up for. And that applies to every single package that we have on the site is eligible. All right, Sunday main slate. Let's see what we have here. And what I'm going to start with is by looking at the superstars. Actually, also, before we get to that, look at the top stacks tool. It might be showing Saturday slate though. Let's see if that's the case. Which teams do we have projected to score the most fantasy points on Sunday? Or is it going to be the Saturday slate? All right, cool. We do have the Sunday slate up here. So let's start by looking at the top stacks tool and seeing which teams are the individual ones that are projecting out the best here. And also, let me see. Is this game, just making sure this isn't the primetime game. All right, so the NFL slate this weekend, we have is that on the, Is Dallas Miami on the main slate? Yes, it is. Okay, good. So we got everything updated in here, and you'll see pretty clearly we have the Miami Dolphins projected to be the team with the highest odds, being the top scoring stack, 15.3%, followed by Minnesota at 11.8%, then Dallas on the other side of the Miami game at 11.5%. So there's a very clear game to stack here. Dallas, Miami. Something of note here as well is that Tyreek Hill is questionable to play. He missed last week's game. He returned to practice today. So hopefully that is an indication that he's going to be good to go by the time that Sunday rolls around. And our projections are assuming Tyreek Hill is going to be in. But since those two teams project so much better than everything else, let's go ahead and just isolate the Dolphins and the Cowboys and look at some of the players that are projecting the best. We want to build some lineups around. All right, first, as far as superstars go, Tyreek Hill is going to be a superstar player here. Raheem Mostert also is a superstar player, but not somebody we're going to really be considering for this slate. And I just realized I only have wide receivers selected, which is why, yeah, here we go. All right, yeah, so from this game, we either have Tyreek Hill or Raheem Mostert to consider. That's Tyreek Hill in a landslide. If you're choosing one of the superstars playing this game, you want to go with Tyreek Hill over Raheem Mostert. But if we go back and look at all of the players in this game, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, they're projecting for the two most fantasy points at 21.46 and 21.11 fantasy points. If we're making game stack, I think Tyreek Hill is a very good use of the superstar spot this week. And obviously, given that he's going to be in the lineup, if he does end up getting ruled out, which is a possibility after he sat last week, Jalen Waddle would definitely be somebody to consider. His core floor asking price is $1.74. We currently have him projected for 15.32 fantasy points, but that number would be closer to 20 fantasy points in a situation where Tyreek Hill doesn't play. We saw Waddle take on a much bigger role for the Dolphins last week when Tyreek Hill was ruled out. And almost immediately, we saw Jalen Waddle catch big passes and ended up with a pretty solid game. Even though he did get hurt, like the third play of the game, Jalen Waddle got banged up, ended up not being an issue, returned to the game, but still did miss out on a few snaps. But last week, I believe was the most targets we had seen from Jalen Waddle in quite a bit of time. And yeah, so 9 targets for Jalen Waddle without Tyreek Hill last week. Caught 8 of them for 142 yards and a touchdown. That was the first game with over 8 targets for Jalen Waddle since October 29th against the Patriots, where he had 12 targets in that game. So clearly the absence of Tyreek Hill had a very big impact on the workload of Jalen Waddle. So if Hill is out, go play some Waddle cards and buy them on the secondary market. As for other guys to consider here, at the quarterback spot, we've got Dak Prescott, we've got Tua. Both of them are projecting pretty well and actually very similarly. So I think we should just differentiate this by who is the lower core floor price, because there are a couple of things I consider as tiebreakers. Obviously, number one, who's cheaper if we're going to buy a card? But then number two, who has the better chance of making a deep playoff run? And at this point in time, I expect both the Dolphins and the Cowboys to be in the playoffs. As far as what their odds are to go deep into the playoffs, that does favor the Cowboys a little bit, but because I think they're the better team. But at the same time, I mean, you got to go through the 49ers in the NFC, which that's an absolute nightmare. I think that they're by far the best team in the NFL. The AFC I view as being a little bit more open, where there's a lot of teams that I think are like kind of in that top tier that are similar, with the Dolphins being one of them. But that aside, Dak Prescott, $3.98 as a core floor asking price, Tua at $3.25. It's so close between the two. I'll lean a little bit towards Tua, but no real strong lean. Like if you're playing 2 lineups for Reignmakers this week, I think one, if you're doing a game stack, could be Tua, and the other one could be Dak Prescott. There isn't too much that differentiates them. Tony Pollard also is not a bad cheap option from this game. We've seen him finally start to look better as of late, and his core floor price is only 79 cents. And once again, 79 cents for a guy that you'd be able to play likely throughout the playoffs, Tony Pollard. Now let's go back, look at the top stacks tool, and see the other team. Believe it or not, the Minnesota Vikings projecting fairly well. Although with that said, it's hard to know what to make of them from a Reignmaker's perspective, considering their quarterback situation. Let's go now and look at all of the players from all the teams on the main slate to see how they're all projecting out. All right, take off these filters. And Let's see what we have at the quarterback spot. So the actual highest projected quarterback, and this is a guy that you guys could play naked. We don't have to stack Justin Fields with anybody. If you were stacking him, I do think that it's, not really controversial. DJ Moore is the guy you'd want to be stacking him with, but good matchup for Justin Fields against the Arizona Cardinals. And Justin Fields has played much better in recent weeks compared to the earlier part of the season. I do think it helps that he has more reps with DJ Moore under his belt. I do think also the rhythm of Justin Fields is thrown off a little bit because of the games that he missed due to injuries. So now that he's back, he's been healthy for a few games. Good matchup against the Cardinals. If you're just looking at a quarterback to play by himself, just who projects the best, Justin Fields. And then also only a 279 core floor asking price for Justin Fields. He's a little cheaper than guys like Dak Prescott and Tua. And that's primarily because we're not expecting, I'm not going to say not expecting. We know the Bears are not going to be in the playoffs this year. Not an expectation. This is just a fact. The Bears are not going to be in the playoffs this year. So as a result, Justin Fields, slightly lower low core asking price on him because we're only getting a few weeks of utility out of him. We're getting more out of Dak Prescott and Tua. Did mention that the Vikings are projecting with the second overall highest top stack odds in our top stacks tool. So Nick Mullins, who there are limited print counts of, is somewhat of a contrarian quarterback you could consider, but it's not a spot that I really want to go to this weekend for me personally. If I'm looking at quarterback, I'm either making a game stack of Dallas, Miami and going with Tua or Prescott, or if you're just overall best play at the position on the slate, that's going to be Justin Fields for you. Running backs. And once again, any questions you guys have, throw them into the YouTube channel. If you haven't done it yet, do me a favor, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Running backs, what do we have to look at here? Jonathan Taylor expected to return this week. This is not confirmed, but that is the way that it seems to be trending. Jonathan Taylor returned to practice. He's missed time recently with a broken thumb. And if he does return, it's easy to think of him as one of the top running backs on the slate, especially because Zach Moss is banged up. So Jonathan Taylor, before he got hurt, he was playing like nearly 100% of the snaps and getting all of the touches for the Colts. And then the game he gets hurt, he ends up splitting snaps with Zach Moss. Then Taylor misses time. We see Zach Moss take on the big workload. I think Jonathan Taylor goes to playing the big workload we saw from Zach Moss the last few weeks, where Moss was getting north of 90% of the touches, north of 90% of the snaps, and it's a great matchup against the Atlanta Falcons as well. Jay is asking for this week, do I prefer the Browns or the Eagles defense? Yeah, let's pull up our projections for the main slate and see what we got projected better. All right, so he's asking the Cleveland or the Eagles defense. Let's see what we've got projected better in here. All right, so defenses. I hate defense so much, by the way. Not something I put a whole lot of thought into most weeks, but we've got the Eagles projected by a pretty decent margin as the best overall defense for the entire week. We've got them projected for 10.18 fantasy points. As for the Browns, we are projecting them fairly well as well, 8.52. There isn't that much difference between the top defenses as there is for, say, like a top running back compared to a mediocre running back on most slates. But you've got the Browns and Eagles. We've got them projected as two of the best defenses possible to roster this upcoming week. But Eagles defense is the way that I prefer to go. We do have them as the top projected defense of the entire week. And we also know that we've got Tommy DeVito a little bit banged up for the Giants. And as far as Cleveland, CJ Stroud is out. Yes, but I still feel better about the backup quarterback situation for the Texans than if DeVito wasn't able to play. Back to the main slate on Saturday, where Jonathan Taylor talked about him projecting really well. There are no running backs that are projected north of 20 fantasy points for us on the main slate on Sunday. So Jonathan Taylor, the top overall option, very low core floor asking price as well, less than $1 for Jonathan Taylor. So strong consideration there. Rachaad White is projected second best in a matchup against the Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence very much up in the air. Now, why does that matter for Rachaad White? This is why it matters. If Trevor Lawrence doesn't play, this is a really favorable game script for Rachaad White in a game where I would expect the Bucs to be pretty decently sized favorites over Jacksonville if it's CJ Beathard at QB instead of Trevor Lawrence. And that would set up for more potential opportunities for Rachaad White. We know how often he's on the field for the Buccaneers. And now also they're in the driver's seat to win the NFC South. So we could actually get a playoff game out of Rachaad White, which is something that I don't think a lot of us would have expected a couple of weeks ago. Tony Pollard also projecting well. So these are our top 3 running backs. And Tony Pollard, the best overall value here with a core floor price of only 79 cents. Wide receivers. What do we have at wide receiver for the main slate? And then after this, I'll look at just all the superstars overall for the Sunday main slate, which there are not too many of them to consider. And then we'll wrap up the show because only a couple minutes left to go here. But the wide receiver spot, Tyreek Hill, who is going to be my preference for superstar overall for the slate. We'll look more at all the superstars here in a second, but pretty sure Tyreek Hill is the guy to land on. If you want to go to other wide receivers, we've got CeeDee Lamb projected very well without the superstar, lost his superstar status a few weeks ago. So CeeDee Lamb, 21.11 fantasy points. He's your highest projected non-superstar wide receiver. Then we've got Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown here, but I would rather play Tyreek Hill, who projects for 2 more fantasy points than Justin Jefferson. He also doesn't have to deal with Nick Mullins as his quarterback. And then we've got a 4 fantasy point gap between Tyreek Hill and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So the next best projected wide receiver who is not a superstar after CeeDee Lamb for us, that is Mike Evans at 17.42 fantasy points. And then don't forget to take a look at Jalen Waddle if Tyreek Hill does actually end up getting ruled out. But if we remove positions here and just look at all of the superstars for the Sunday main slate, here's what we're looking at. Tyreek Hill projects the best, followed by Justin Jefferson. There's a decent projection gap there. Tyreek Hill is also in a more stackable game environment. So Tyreek Hill, that's a superstar to roster this weekend. Guys, thank you very much for watching. If you have not done it yet, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you want to sign up for any package at Stokastic.com, use the link below in the promo code HOLIDAY for 25% off. Good luck. Enjoy the weekend. And also, if you want more content, I'm going to be on content throughout the weekend. Saturday, football live before lock. But also for tonight, there's NBA live before lock from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern time, followed by an NFL live before lock for more NFL content. So check that out later, guys. Peace out.